The Authority Edit.
The Authority Edit, Bonus Episode 2. Pride and Prejudice, the room Elizabeth Bennet was never meant to command. Welcome back to the Authority Edit. Last time in our bonus series, we looked at Coco Chanel, a woman who built a complete visual language of authority from scratch in a context that had never imagined her. Today, we're going further back, 213 years back to be precise. Because Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, one of my favorites, is not a romance novel. I mean, it is, but it is also one of the most precise, most merciless, and most instructive studies of social intelligence ever written. Austen understood power: who has it, who performs it, who loses it, and who acquires it without even ever being supposed to, with a clarity that most modern leadership books don't come close to matching. And she gave us three women who, between them, cover every mistake and every mastery we've been talking about in this podcast: Elizabeth Bennet, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and Mrs. Bennet. One is a masterclass in social intelligence. One is a cautionary tale about authority without intelligence. And one, and this is the uncomfortable one, is a portrait of what happens when effort, anxiety, and good intentions combine to produce exactly the opposite of the desired result. Let's begin. Elizabeth Bennet, Power Without Permission. Elizabeth Bennet has no institutional authority whatsoever. She has no money, no title, no position in social hierarchy, and yet she's the most powerful person in almost every scene she enters. Why? Because Elizabeth has mastered instinctively and completely every principle of social intelligence we've been discussing in this podcast. Start with her visual architecture. Elizabeth is not the most polished woman in any room. Austen is explicit about this. She arrives at Netherfield with muddy skirts after walking miles across fields to visit her sick sister. And the reaction of the Bingley sisters is precisely what you'd expect: disdain, dismissal, a pointed commentary on her lack of decorum. But here's what Austen understands that the Bingley sisters don't. Elizabeth's muddy skirts are not a failure of image, they are a statement of it. They communicate vitality, independence, and a complete absence of the performative fragility that defined feminine respectability at the time. Her visual architecture says, I am a woman who acts, who moves through the world rather than being displayed in it. That is not an accident, that is a choice. Now look at her social intelligence in conversation. Elizabeth never softens her speech unnecessarily. She never pre apologizes for her opinions. When Mr. Darcy is rude to her at the first ball, dismissing her as a tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me, she does not shrink. She does not seek his approval. She finds it funny. She repeats it to her friends. She turns his dismissal into a story that positions her as the one with perspective, and him as the one who revealed himself. That is advanced social intelligence, not retaliation, observation, not aggression, clarity. She reads the room, understands the dynamic, and responds in a way that costs her nothing and costs him considerably more than he realizes. And when Lady Catherine arrives at Longbourn, in the novel's final act, furious, entitled, absolutely certain that her institutional authority will be sufficient to bend Elizabeth to her will, Elizabeth does something extraordinary. She simply refuses to be intimidated, not rudely, not aggressively, with complete composure and complete clarity. I'm only resolved to act in that manner which will, in my opinion, constitute my happiness without reference to you or to any person who so wholly unconnected with me. That is readiness without servitude in a single sentence. I am the most composed person in this room. I am warm enough to engage with you, and I owe you nothing. Elizabeth's authority was never given to her. She built it entirely from the inside out, from intellectual independence, from moral integrity, from the capacity for genuine self criticism when she was wrong, and from an absolute refusal to perform subordination in rooms that expected it from her. In the protocol edit method, that is the highest expression of social intelligence. Not reading the room so you can fit into it. Reading the room so you can navigate it entirely on your own terms. Lady Catherine Bourgh, when authority becomes noise. Now let's talk about Lady Catherine, because Lady Catherine is one of the most instructive figures in all English literature for anyone who wants to understand what authority looks like when it hollows out from the inside. Lady Catherine has everything Elizabeth doesn't: title, wealth, position, institutional power. She has spent decades being deferred to, being consulted, being obeyed, and it has done nothing, and it has done something, very specific to her social intelligence. It has destroyed it entirely. Because Lady Catherine no longer reads rooms, she simply enters them and expects them to reconfigure around her presence. She dispenses opinions as though they were facts. She asks questions that are actually commands. She mistakes the performance of authority, the volume, the certainty, the social dominance for authority itself. And Austen shows us with devastating precision that this is not the same thing. When Lady Catherine confronts Elizabeth, certain that her statutes alone will be sufficient to end the matter, she loses. Not because Elizabeth has more power, but because Elizabeth has more intelligence. Lady Catherine's authority, built entirely on external structures rather than internal composure, cannot survive contact with someone who simply refuses to grant it. In the language of the protocol edit method, Lady Catherine has visual architecture. The title, the estate, the social position are all structural signals of power. But she has no social intelligence. She cannot read the dynamic. She cannot adapt. She cannot understand that the most powerful move available to her in that confrontation would have been restraint, not volume. The lesson here is one I want to carry I want you to carry into every high stakes room you enter. Authority that needs to announce itself has already begun to lose. The most commanding presence in any room is almost never the loudest one. It is the most deliberate one, the one that chooses its words with precision, occupies its space with intention, and never ever mistakes noise for power. Mrs. Bennet, the cost of anxious visibility. And now the uncomfortable one. Mrs. Bennet is not a villain. She's not stupid. She's a woman in an impossible situation. 5 daughters, an entailed estate, a husband who has checked out of the project of protecting his family, doing everything she can with the tools available to her. And she's doing catastrophic damage with almost every move she makes. Mrs. Bennet is, in the language of this podcast, pure visual and social noise. Her presence in any room immediately raises the anxiety level of that room. Her conversation is reactive, excessive, and focused almost entirely on her own concerns, which means that rather than reading the social architecture around her, she's constantly disrupting it. Rather than building genuine connection, she's broadcasting desperation. Rather than preserving the mystery that would give her family social currency, she's spending it compulsively in every interaction until there's nothing left. And here's the tragedy: everything Mrs. Bennet does, she does in service of a completely legitimate goal. She wants her daughter secure. She wants her family protected. She's not wrong about the stakes. She's catastrophically wrong about the strategy. Because in the protocol edit method, social intelligence is never about the intensity of your effort. It is about the quality of your signal. And Mrs. Bennet's signal, however hard she works, however much she cares, is one of anxiety, reactivity, and need. And anxiety, reactivity, and need are never read as authority. They are read as vulnerability. And vulnerability in the wrong context, with the wrong audience, is the thing that gets used against you. The lesson Mrs. Bennet offers is perhaps the most important one in this entire episode. Working harder in the wrong direction does not produce better results. It produces louder failure. Social intelligence means stepping back from the anxiety, reading the actual dynamic in front of you, and choosing precision over volume every single time. Three women, one novel, 200 years ago. And every single dynamic they navigate: the woman who commands rooms she has never meant to enter, the woman whose institutional authority collapses under its own weight, the woman whose effort works against her at every turn, is sitting in boardrooms, in pitch meetings, in networking events right now. Austen didn't write a romance, she wrote a field guide. Next week, we're back to the methodology with episode 6, the one I get asked about most: how to dress specifically for boards, for pitches, and for negotiations. The high stake wardrobe. What's different? What's the same? And the mistakes I see even the most strategic women making when the pressure is high. I'll see you next week.
Now step into